I quit using Arch Linux about 3 months ago, and in this video I'm going to share all of my experiences from switching to Fedora, what I've learned, how the experience is of using it every single day, and whether you should consider switching as well. So let's jump in. So as I mentioned, I switched to Fedora, but I switched to a very specific version of Fedora, which is Fedora Sway Atomic. Now these Atomic desktops are different than the normal Fedora workstation, for example, because they are an Immutable OS. Now what that means is that it is a very different way of installing Linux on your machine. These Immutable OSs, they actually install an image, and then when you boot your system, this image is loaded. Now when you then update your system, it actually will update it in the background automatically. It will actually create a second version or a new version of that image on your machine, and then it will boot that new image the next time you boot up. So you always have two different versions of your operating system running every single time, which means that if you update and if you then have an issue, you can always roll back to the exact same state of your system that was running when it was still working. So this means that you will always have a working system. And this is facilitated by using OS3 and rpm-ostree. You can read all about it in the documentation. But the most important thing here is that on your Fedora Atomic desktop, the root file system is mounted as read-only. So you can literally not change things in your root file system. However, the etc and var directories are writable, and what they do is they will, for example, symlink your /home to var home. It's very interesting. There are a few switches you have to make in your head if you're used to using Linux already, especially coming from Arch Linux. So you're not able to just change things on your root file system, but rather you're forced to think about what is actually writable and what do I want to change, and therefore also what do I want to back up and store for later, right? So for me, it has really made me a better engineer to run this operating system. And in the next sections, I'll go a little bit deeper into that. So it's a different way of running Linux, but my general impression of this is that it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love how this works. I went for the Sway version of the Fedora Atomic desktop. Yeah, it has just been a fantastic experience, I gotta say. It includes Podman for containers. I'll get a little bit more into that in a second, but it really is a fully functional, complete operating system. So Sway is configured for you out of the box, and you basically have a working system that you can just start working with right away. Now, it has been super stable for me. This is one of the biggest advantages. Like I've been using this on both my framework laptop and my framework desktop. So I've been using this full time for 3 months plus, doing all of my work, my coaching work, my freelance consulting work, my content creation work. Everything has been done on these Linux machines. This video is being recorded on Fedora Atomic Sway right now. And yeah, it has just been a fantastic experience. Super stable, no issues at all, very quick to install, but also it has become completely reproducible. I mean, I can literally just do rpm-ostree status, and this will give me a full overview of all of the packages that I've layered in here. And I can literally just take this list, and this is basically the state of my operating system. If I have this, my export of my Flatpak packages and my home directory, I can reproduce this on any machine. So I really like this method of using it. I have had no issues with drivers or any like hardware related issues when using this operating system. And also I have had almost zero issues with screen sharing and Wayland, which is a very important piece of my work, of doing a lot of meetings, doing a lot of coaching, helping people live in KubeCraft, right? I have to share my screen and teach them. Well, it has been no problems at all. Like I maybe one time it didn't work and I just restarted and it worked again. So it has been a great experience so far in that sense. Now, real quick, if you enjoy this video or any other of my videos, please subscribe to the channel. It's a completely free way to support me, but each of these videos cost me $700 to produce. I have editors that I have to pay. I have to pay for designers and everything. So it actually is a high cost for me to produce these videos, So please, it's a free way to support the channel. We're almost at 100K right now. So please show your support by just subscribing, and it really helps me out. Thank you so much. Now let's dive into how Fedora Atomic Sway has made me a better engineer. And the first reason for this is because it forced me to use Podman. As we see on the landing page for Fedora Sway Atomic, I keep saying Fedora Atomic Sway, but it's actually Fedora Sway Atomic, so forgive me for that. But as they show on the landing page, it includes Podman for development. I've had Podman on my list for a long time, but I was running Arch Linux, I was running Docker, so I had no real incentive to switch, right? So switching to Fedora Sway Atomic also forced me to just switch to Podman right away. So it has been like a forced switch to Podman. And I gotta say, I really like Podman. And it made me a better engineer because of the following reason. On Arch Linux, you have full control over your full operating system, your root file system. There's like no limitations, which is why I liked Arch Linux so much, right? Especially when you build it from the ground up like I did. So you know all of the moving parts, and you know exactly how it works. On these Atomic desktops, you have less freedom in that sense. And Podman, by default, runs as rootless. So it's rootless install of Podman, which means that these processes are running under your own user. Now, in my work as a DevOps engineer, I usually have to do some quite funky stuff with Docker. I run Kubernetes inside of Docker containers. I use Docker containers inside of Docker containers using D&D, Docker in Docker. And I used to create like local development setups where I was developing inside of a container, and then inside of that container, I would deploy a containerized Kubernetes clusters. Like these are the advanced workflows that I teach in KubeCraft to my students. Now, this will only work if you are running Docker as a root full install. So you're running Docker as root on your system. Now, by switching to rootless Podman, I had to really adjust these workflows. So my initial reaction was to just start tinkering with Podman and run it as root, and I got that to work fine, and everything worked. But I started thinking, it didn't sit right with me. Like I wanted to have the right way of doing it, the rootless install of Podman. And yeah, I have to change a few things about my workflows. It's not necessarily compatible with everything that I was doing. But this process, it did make me a better engineer because I had to engineer around this limitation of running rootless Podman. And frankly, that is the right way to do it. So this forced me to become a better engineer and to design my workflows and processes around this. So learning Podman has been really fun, and I'm really glad I made the switch. My next move in my personal learning journey is to start working more with local AI. And yeah, you can just install Ollama and run it like that, but I wanna do it a little bit differently, especially on my framework laptop. The GPU in there is optimized for running AI workloads, right? So what I want to start working with is mounting GPUs into my containers or using the GPU to use the GPU accelerated local AI models. And I'm yet to dive into this, but they're running Podman, like Podman images, is going to be an extra fun challenge to do it the proper way. Whereas on Arch Linux, it's just very easy to just run rootful containers. You can mount anything you want and just mount the hardware right into it, and it would work right away. So I have to start working around these issues. Now, if you're not aware, Toolbox is a utility that ships with these Atomic desktops, which is meant for you to install CLI tools inside of a container. So what I showed you here was, this is layering in packages in your main base image. And this is completely fine to do, by the way. Like, there is this idea out there that you should not be layering packages into your base image, which is false. You can and should modify your image. But the whole thinking behind this is that you reduce this as much as possible. And then instead, you force yourself to run all of your other tools inside of containers. But for example, Tailscale, it's very difficult to get that to work from a containerized fashion if you want to give it access to your entire system. Likewise, I use Tmux to run all of my containers, etc. I orchestrate everything, So I want tmux to be available on my main command line here, on my main terminal. I don't want to enter a container for it to be running tmux. Like, this is just my preference, right? So Toolbox is then a utility where you can create a toolbox. It's just a containerized environment in which you can install tools. So for example, if I do which SL, the SL command is not installed on the system. So what you would do is you would do toolbox create test1, for example, and then it creates a toolbox for you. And if I then do toolbox enter test1, and actually before I do that, let me just show you. If I do sudo dnf install SL, it will, yeah, I'll type my password. It says DNF is not even found, right? So I cannot install packages on my system because the root file system is read-only, right? So in order to install packages, you would then toolbox enter test1. So I'm now inside of this container, and now I could do sudo dnf install SL, and now it would update the repository and install this command for me. So if I install that, now I can run SL, and I have the SL command that runs on my system. But this is running inside of a container, and this is what Toolbox is meant for. So it's meant to give you a very easy way of running CLI tools inside of a containerized environment, which I love. Like, I love that this environment forces you to think in containers and to work in containers. Now, I've been doing this for years already, and I prefer to use dev containers, which is something that I teach in depth inside of KubeCraft. And if you want to learn more about that, there is a link down below where you can get more information about that. Now, going back to local AI, I know that there are toolbox images that are tailored for this specific project, right? So that it's tailored to use these framework GPUs for local AI. So I know there are some things available, but I'm actually really excited to start diving into this. I had to wait for a long time, but now I finished all of my other projects, and now I can finally start going into this. So I'm really excited about this. But if I were on Arch Linux, I would have probably not bothered with all of this, right? I would have not bothered with Toolbox, finding custom images, and learning more about how a container would then interact with that GPU, right? It's a lot easier if you can just use it almost directly from the container. In this way, when you're running it as your own user, you have to be more aware of what's going on instead of just running everything as root. So in that sense, it is making me a better engineer. Now, the next question then is, do I regret leaving Arch? But before I dive into that, I just want to mention that I created a free 8-hour Linux course. This is actually taken directly from my curriculum that my paid students use. It's 8 hours of full in-depth Linux command line teaching. And if you are watching this and you're thinking, what the hell is this guy talking about with containers and Podman and everything? Well, go here, school.com/Linux. It is completely for free. You can join, and then there is a free 8-hour course that you can follow. And there's also courses around DevOps fundamentals, and I'm doing weekly live streams inside of this community where you can ask me questions, and I help you directly with your Linux journey. So if you want to join a very active Linux community, one of the best ones on the internet, then go to school.com/Linux. It's completely for free, and I'll see you in the free Linux community. So do I regret leaving Arch? Well, I got to start by saying that Arch Linux made me the engineer that I am today. So when I was using Ubuntu, I could use Linux, but the day that I switched from Ubuntu and built my Arch Linux from scratch with hours and hours of studying the Arch wiki, it made me the engineer that I am today. Now, remember, this was before ChatGPT, right? So I actually had to comb through the Arch forums. When I had an issue, I would actually have to go to Stack Overflow or the Arch Wiki, if anyone remembers Stack Overflow. So I'm very proud and happy of that experience that I got before ChatGPT to having to figure these things out. Because what I see now in junior engineers, they are not building these skills. They are not getting the correct mentorship and the right guidance, and they just default to ChatGPT. And frankly, they're not going to be as good as the people who have gone through the process that me and others have gone through. So the students that I teach in KubeCraft follow this approach. I guide them to build their own Arch Linux system from scratch, completely encrypted, using only systemd, using as a basic system as possible. And it works really well because it forces them to learn these skills, right? And if you do it this way, and if you run your own Arch Linux system for a while, you're learning what it takes to build and operate a Linux system from scratch. You will know about all of the moving parts and what exactly you need to do and manage for these things to work. When you install something like this, everything is done for you. There's almost nothing that you have to configure or that you should configure. Like many things you can't even configure, right? So if you were to jump straight into something like this, you're going to rob yourself of a lot of learning. On the other hand, it does seem like I chose a good time to switch. So almost right after I switched, there was an issue with NVIDIA drivers. So what happened in late December was that NVIDIA started messing with the drivers and it no longer supported GTX 10XX GPU. So if you had a 1070 NVIDIA GPU, if you then just ran Pacman SYU and updated your system, you would reboot and your system wouldn't work anymore. So I was not running one of these GPUs, but there was a lot of activity on the forums that I read around this. And yeah, I fortunately, I didn't have to deal with this. And now actually just today, there was an update to the Arch install script. You should not be using the Arch install script. Like if you're using Arch Linux and you use the script to install it, you have no business running Arch. Just go to Fedora. If you don't have the skills to install Arch from scratch, you have no business installing Arch. You're probably running an unencrypted system, which is extremely dangerous that you don't even realize it. So I'm just so against even an Arch install script existing because it allows people to use this stuff and run insecure, unencrypted operating systems without having the correct required knowledge of running these safely. Now, that being said, they removed the proprietary NVIDIA drivers from the Arch install script, which will, of course, confuse many users who have no idea what's going on. Interestingly, the NVIDIA DKMS package is not even no longer available in the official repos anymore. Yeah, I switched, and then all of this stuff started happening, and I distinctly remember using the NVIDIA DKMS package myself. So I kind of saved myself from some headaches there. And there have been a few other issues with Arch Linux in the meantime. So I did choose a good time to switch, apparently. But on the other hand, like I'm confident in my Linux skills that I would have easily been able to solve these things anyway. So for me, I don't regret switching yet. Like I've gone through the experience. Arch Linux made me the engineer I am today. And because I'm a cloud native engineer and I work exclusively in and with containers and Kubernetes, right now, Fedora is actually making me a better engineer, especially with the Immutable OS way of running the operating system. It is forcing me to think in containers, to run things under my own user, and I cannot take these shortcuts that I would be able to do on Arch Linux. So I can do that because Arch Linux brought me there. But right now, Fedora is making me a better engineer. What I also like about Fedora is that it's sponsored by Red Hat, and therefore you can also be sure that it's also going to be a system that is continuously being developed and that is going to work, right? And I almost never had any real issues with Arch Linux, but it would happen that when I would sometimes have an issue, then I would have to spend maybe an hour or two debugging it and fixing it. Now, I am running a multi-six-figure business. I have multiple clients. I do freelance work, contracting work, and I'm not in a position where I can just simply have a system that doesn't work for a couple of hours. Like when you're just an employee, it's fine to just not working for an hour or so because you're fixing your system. That is not really an issue. But like my time is worth about $1,000 an hour right now. And if I have an issue with my computer, then if I do that, if I start messing too much with it and lose a lot of time on it, then my business is losing money. So For me, I'm in a stage in my career and in my development as an entrepreneur where I just cannot afford having a lot of time lost on these things, especially when I'm out and about and traveling with my camper van because I'm adopting a more remote lifestyle. Well, I want a system that just always works. And especially when I'm on the road, I will typically reduce my working hours from about 10, 11 hours a day, 7 days a week. I will then work maybe 4 to 6 hours, 7 days a week. And especially when I have that compressed time, I do not want to have any issues with my machine. On the other hand, I don't want to be running macOS either, right? I want to have a Linux system that works. And for me, the best middle way in there right now for where I am in my career and in my business and in my life goals, Fedora Atomic perfectly hits that spot. It forces me to work in containers, to learn more about containers and how to properly use them instead of taking shortcuts. And it is also super stable. I will always have a running system because when I'm on the road and my machine updates and something breaks, I can just simply reboot, load the old image, and I'm up and running again. It's just perfect for that sense. So should you switch? Well, I definitely think it depends on where you are in your career journey. Like if you're learning Linux for career purposes, if you want to become a better engineer, then I strongly recommend you at least running Arch Linux for a year or so, or something similar like that to become better at Linux, right? Now, if you are a casual Linux user and you're not necessarily interested in learning Linux deeply, but you just want to have a private operating system that is separate from the big tech, that is not going to run all this spyware on your machine like Windows will, then I would say this might actually be the best option for you because it is safe out of the box. But you have to remember to encrypt your system. It is a much more secure way of running your system because everything is read-only, right? So getting hacked is a lot more difficult because everything is running in containers or in Flatpaks. So for the casual user, I would actually prefer this. Like I have this project that one day I will make my 70-year-old dad use daily drive Linux. Well, the first thing I'm going to install for him is this Atomic desktop because it will always work. It will always be stable. It updates automatically, and he literally couldn't destroy as much as he could on, for example, if you just run Ubuntu normally. So for the casual user, I would say, yeah, you can dive straight into this. But if you're learning Linux for your career at any capacity, I would not recommend jumping straight into this if you haven't had that manual debugging phase and running how to operate and administer a Linux system as your daily driver for a while. But if you want to learn how to do that, if you want to learn how to work on the command line like a proper Linux engineer, go to school.com/Linux. You can get my free 8-hour Linux course. It is the same material that my paid students use, and I've gotten only positive feedback on it. It's completely for free. Go to school.com/Linux and join today, and you can follow my free 8-hour Linux course. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.